Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. The testimony to faith and our teaching. In this tradition, we believe that we are co-creating our lives with Spirit, and sometimes that belief gets challenged, does it not? When life doesn't turn out the way we thought it was supposed to. And yet, if we will hold in our faith, the way is made known. And if you didn't catch that song is based upon the story of Jesus walking on the water and calling Peter out of the boat to stand where feet may fail. How many of you have ever looked at a nice big body of water and think, I'm going to walk right across that? It's not the way reality looks, and that's a beautiful metaphor, that there are times in our lives that we cannot see in our human understanding and our human experience how we're going to get across that, and yet we do. We are lifted, carried, and we are transformed by the process. This is not my message today, but I just had to say all that. I guess in terms of a segue. Now, to talk about everyone belongs. A man walked into the bank and he walked up to the teller and he said, I need to take out $100 from my checking account. And the teller says, withdrawal? The guy paused and he said, I would like to get $100 out of my checking account. Thank you for that. Y'all, some of you got it big time. With a drawl, get it? Okay. The last Sunday of June, we have now developed a tradition over the last 10 years or so to celebrate Pride, which is about LGBTQIA plus inclusion. I'm so proud that we are a community that has always seen the truth of God's light in this community, who have often been cast out in religious settings for many, many years, for decades, for centuries. And so that's changing, but we are very much a part of inclusivity and welcoming. As a matter of fact, we have 3 statements about being, becoming, and belonging. And our belonging statement says that we create a spiritual home for all people, knowing that we are one body and that we belong to each other. This is not just a feel-good statement of, we're going to like everybody and kumbaya. This is actually in alignment with our deepest philosophy and theology of oneness, that we are a non-dual teaching. We believe in a non-dual reality, that God has never separated itself from reality, from creation. That creation itself is the outpicturing, is the body of God. That when God said, let there be peace, no, that's our song. When God said, let there be light, that's it. There was light. And that creative energy of becoming, it also shows up in our belonging. Everyone belongs. Everyone belongs. We've taken that as our theme today, and it's also a little bit of a rewording of a wonderful saying and teaching by that wonderful Franciscan priest. I'm losing my words. We'll see where this goes today. Richard Rohr, who says everything belongs, that he also is a deep teacher in the Christian non-dual tradition, and that there is no place where God is not, that the presence and power of life itself, of divine creative intelligence, of love is everywhere present. And sometimes we can't see it. And so this is where we begin to live from a faith that there is a deeper reality than what my senses perceive. And because we believe this, we are called into a seeing of other human beings as places where God shows up. And we believe that most of the time. Until our teenager starts acting like a teenager. Until that other political party starts doing what they're doing. Then we begin to kind of walk that back. What do you mean all people? Not all people. No, that's what we mean, all people. There's actually a shadow in our community, in our teaching, in our spiritual community that it's coming to light more and more that we love unity. We love inclusivity, but we don't always practice it. Reverend Johnny Coleman was the first African-American minister to be ordained by Unity. She wasn't allowed to live on campus when the other students in the 1950s at Unity Village. Yeah, is that really? Seeing the divine everywhere, creating a spiritual home for all people, and she stood for her truth, and that changed. Then there another time later at Unity Village, they had children, teen gathering, and they weren't letting the black kids swim in the pool. And somebody called Johnny, and she called the village, and they got in the pool. And because of her experience there, she founded her own denomination. She started her own church, Christ Universal Temple in Chicago, and her denomination still thrives. It's one of our our New Thought traditions. It's the Federation for Better Living, United Federation for Better Living, and we had the president of that organization speak on our stage a couple of years ago, Sheila McKeithen. So in retrospect, we can see, we weren't really living up to our oneness. And what I believe we're being called to now is to look now and seeing, are we being inclusive? Are we truly living our spiritual principles? You know, every time we do a new member class, we go around and we ask the new members how long they've been attending and what's the thing they love most about Unity. 95% of the time, it's the diversity. That's what people love here. They love that we are a diverse community. It's my favorite thing about us, too, is that we all come from such different backgrounds, but we are committed to living this truth of oneness, of unity. And we're not perfect, but it is my deep intention that we begin to deepen our welcome and our embrace. I shared a few weeks ago on Friendship Sunday about this idea in biomimicry, which is a field of study of how biology shows us the natural way of energy and the way it should move. And you can begin to build human systems and institutions and organizations based upon what nature does. And reforestation can be done pretty easily, but when they discovered that if they plant what they call a welcoming island when they're reforesting, and it's just much fewer trees, only takes 16% of the resources as the traditional row planting of monoculture. But 16% of the resources, you plant a smaller area, you bring more biodiversity into that area, and it creates what they call a welcoming island. And all of those welcoming islands, they thrive and they grow towards one another, and the forest is restored. And that is my vision for what we're doing to heal the broken social fabric in our culture today, is that we are creating in our community a place of deep welcome, of deep commitment to live our oneness, creating a spiritual home for all people. And there's no caveat here, but there is another statement sometimes I want to make. Not all behaviors. That we do not tolerate bigotry, we do not tolerate violence or language like that, all people are welcome, but you can leave those behaviors outside of our walls, because that's not really who we are, and that's not who you are. But we are seeking to build that space of deep and true and wide welcome. And the truth is, all of us have work to do about that, because all of us still otherize. We do. It's part of being in the incarnate experience. I saw a Buddhist teacher I really liked, Tara Brach. She says, we forget oneness 100 times a day. It's just a big part of our process is to, there I am again, otherizing somebody. This too is a child of God. Whatever that practice is for you, just go, yes, this too is a child of God who is acting a fool. They don't look to me, from my perspective, like they know they're a child of God. But my job is to see beyond condition, to see the truth of the light of God present in every person. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. I was thinking about what I would love to share with you today. And I love Reverend Howard's message last week, and he talked about the teachings of Jesus, and then he compared to some teachings in the Hindu tradition. And I had this same idea a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking about this talk, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with this Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, verses 1 through 7. Now the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." They don't go to Unity. Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and says, 'Rejoice with me.' Calls his neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep.' And I tell you that there will be in the same way more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent." If you grew up in traditional Christian teaching, you heard that a lot, and it was all about bringing the lost sheep in, getting to say the prayer so they're on the right team with us. Metaphysically, I don't believe that's what this is about. Jesus, as a non-dual teacher, I believe what he was pointing to is that everyone belongs. Everyone belongs. And that we are called to remember this deep truth for one another. And to practice this belonging teaching, to practice this way. There are 3 parables that Jesus told back to back. Well, they're recorded in the Gospel of Luke in that way, back to back to back. And they are the parable of the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the prodigal son. And it comes in response to this accusation that Jesus was hanging out with the bad people. That Jesus is being told, "No, you're hanging out with the sinners. Don't do that." And Jesus said, "Everyone belongs. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is a child of the infinite love of God." And Jesus was demonstrating, and as the shepherd, he is to go forward and pull them in. But if we think about this from a metaphysical perspective, we all are that Christ mind. We all have that Christ spirit. That is our job, is to go to the places where someone feels lost and apart and embrace them and welcome them into the truth of God's love. So how do we do that? And what does it mean to be lost? Now, in the old sin and salvation theology, it means that I haven't yet accepted Christ's atonement. I'm going to hell. In Unity, we teach that heaven and hell are not places you go when you die, but states of consciousness and experience right here and now. And so when we are lost is when we have separated ourselves from this consciousness of wholeness and unity. In 1 John chapter 4, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." And in verse 11, it goes on, "Dear friends, since God so loved us, we ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us and is made complete in us. This is how we know that we live in him and he in us. He has given us his Spirit." Pretty clear. Jesus said, "They will know you are my disciples by what? By your love for one another." Not your love for some ideal, perfect being and God in heaven, but your love for one another. This is the demonstration of us being in alignment with that Christ Spirit, is love. Not judgment, not separation, not hatred. Now, the Bhagavad Gita, which is translated as the Song of God. It's one of my favorite holy scriptures. It comes from the Hindu tradition, and it tells the story of Arjuna, Prince Arjuna, and Krishna on the battlefield. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, epic poem, really, with deep spiritual teachings. This comes from chapter 6 and verse 29 and 30. Krishna is speaking. "The true yogis," and yoga means union. It means oneness. So those who practice union and oneness are yogis. "The true yogis, uniting their consciousness with God, see with an equal eye all living beings in God, and God in all living beings. For those who see me everywhere and see all things in me, I am never lost, nor are they ever lost to me. This, I believe, is the clearest scripture that I know of that says what non-duality means. There is one power and one presence. You can call it God if that's that. I'm good with that word. I know many people have like old baggage around that, and I'm just going to invite you into the truth that if I say the word God and you're thinking of that judging, punishing person you learned about in another place, that's not what I'm talking about. I call it God because it's the biggest word I know. But this one power and presence is all, in all, as all. And when we unite our consciousness with that, living from this love of each other, we are united in this oneness. We see God in everyone, and we see everything in God. And this is where we stumble. Because of the pain and the struggle and the suffering, we are not able to see all of that in God. And as Boris so beautifully testified today, 6 years of dialysis, 6 years of struggle and pain, and yet he was committed to seeing all of this in God. And that is what we are all called to do. I was at Unity Village a couple weeks ago for our convention, and I was aware of a lot of unspoken grief that many of our churches are closing, and many of our ministers have left the ministry because it's just a tough time in the world of spiritual community. It's happening in all denominations and all religions. And I thought about that and how we're so uncomfortable with our grief that we just push it away. And when we did a meditation in one of the workshops, and Reverend Tim Lytle read this passage and we reflected on it, I had this deep awareness that my grief is in God. The losses that I have experienced are in God. And something in me just expanded and allowed, and I breathed more deeply than I had around my own personal losses, to know that my God is big enough to hold my pain, to hold my sorrow. And even those difficult things we face are held in this love of infinite value. And so I believe what the author of the Bhagavad Gita, and I believe the author of 1 John, and whoever recorded this beautiful parable of Jesus, they're all pointing us to this deep truth. None of us is lost in God. That all of us are called back into this unifying consciousness of love. And so that's why we're here today, celebrating Pride. That this group of people, and there are others, and we have celebrated the pride and culture of other. We do Black History Month, we do Hispanic Heritage Month, other groups of minorities who are not in the predominant culture who have experienced not the great things, that they have experienced a lot of difficulty and yet have persevered. And we in this community see the truth that all of us belong. Everyone belongs. So how do we get there? There's a return. A return not to maybe what we've experienced before, but what we truly are at the deep and essential self. Jesus also talked about, do not suffer the little children, for you must become as one of them to enter into the kingdom of heaven. I believe that too is a spiritual, non-dual teaching, that we have to release our conditioned mind, our separate thinking, to enter into this kingdom. Many religions have come after, and the bulk of Christianity has developed lists of rules and things you have to do to belong to Jesus, to belong to the church. And Jesus himself didn't do that. He was a rule breaker. He was a disruptor. He ate the grain on the Sabbath. He talked to the prostitutes and the tax collectors. He didn't live that way. And so I don't know how people have gotten that excluding other people as not being good enough is somehow being Christian. But they do, don't they? It's not the truth of it. To follow Jesus means to be in the way of embrace and welcome and love and respect. So we've got to get back to that. Many of you are deep and long-time students of A Course in Miracles. I love this passage. Each one you see, you place within the holy circle of atonement, or leave outside, judging him fit for crucifixion or redemption. If you bring him into the circle of purity, you will rest there with him. If you leave him without, you join him there. To accuse is to not understand. John Moore was teaching a workshop here a few years ago, and he and I were walking in Herman Park before, and he wanted to do an exercise based on this passage about this circle of atonement. If you got that, what it says is that when you judge someone else, you take yourself out of the circle of God's oneness and love. And so the exercise he created was really powerful. We're standing in circles of, 8 or 10, and we asked someone to represent for us someone that I'm holding is outside of the circle of God. And when I look at that person, what they did is they came and took my hand, and we walked outside of the circle. No words were spoken, and I was to gaze in their eyes until I could remember the truth of who they are. And we came back into the circle. Sometimes by putting something in our body that way, we feel it differently. And then I got to do that for the same person who was having an issue with their mother, I remember. And so she took me outside of the circle, and she looked into my eyes, and I don't know what it was she was going with, but I could see the pain, and then I saw it soften. And then she hugged me, and we walked back into the circle. That's the return I'm talking about. When we get past our judgment, we get past our blame, and we remember that this person is doing the best they can, then we are returned to the circle of God. Support for equality or equal rights for LGBTQ people is the highest level it's ever been. You probably see that. I have Pride merchandise at Target, although that's controversial. And the news stations are showing the big Pride celebration last night downtown Houston, and it's changed. 90% of Americans polled support equal rights for gay and lesbian and transgendered people. So that's huge. That's huge. It's the fastest change in an opinion on a civil rights issue ever in American history. Doesn't mean that we don't have more work to do, but it is big. I wanted to share with you two experiences from my own life, from straight men, and how this change has reflected and how it affected me. When I grew up in this Methodist church, a little country Methodist church in Oklahoma, our next door neighbor, and I've shared this before, and it was painful. My neighbor, I heard him say, they were talking about gay and lesbian people, gay men, and he said, I think they all need to be lined up and shot. And he said this in the church fellowship hall, and nobody opposed him. Later, I heard my mom say that wasn't right, what he said. But that's what I grew up around, and so you can imagine what I had to do to survive, knowing I was gay in that church as a kid. And then yesterday, I got a text from another straight man, somebody who is a friend of mine here in this community. And he had taken his children to a park near downtown, just having a great time. And then he starts hearing people shouting on megaphones. It sounded angry, and they were leaving, and he recognizes that this is a protest group against the Pride celebration. And he was disturbed by it. Disturbed because they were quoting scriptures. And they were also shouting racist things out at people. And just that hate that gets wrapped in Bible and religion. And as I'm sure you are all feeling that, that's not Jesus. That's not Christianity. He felt the same. And he said he was about to go back to the car and just leave in silence. And then something said, my kids are here and they're seeing me. I've got to do something. And so he turned and he confronted these men. And he said, I don't know that I was actually acting all that Christian. I was pretty angry. But he confronted them. He called them false prophets. And this is just a part of what he wrote me yesterday I want to share with you. He said, I've never protested on behalf of LGBTQ community, but I have been to one event in support of equal rights and treatment of this community. And I guess I just got to experience firsthand the kind of BS this community faces, and it's not right. I can only imagine how you felt in a small town. Anyways, I guess I just wanted to tell you that I have a greater degree of empathy, and I hope that groups like these fall like the walls of Jericho so that loving our neighbor becomes our standard. Thank you. A few years ago, an African-American member of our church, after I become senior minister, she asked for time with me, and she shared, and she's given me permission to share this story. She made an amends to me. She said, Michael, I've always loved the gay people in my family. I've always loved them, but I had a real hard time sitting under the teaching of a gay pastor. And she said, I didn't like it. I was ashamed that I had this, but I prayed about it. I went to God, and I'm here to tell you that I have repented. And I'm here to make amends to you. And we cried together in my office, and I said, I don't feel like you owe me any amends. I do understand how hard it is to break across those cultural boundaries. But she said, no, this is important. You need to know that I was wrong. Wasn't it good? And after that, she's the one that was the first one to tell me this, that some of her family is like, what are you doing going to that white church? And I said then, we're not a white church. We're not a black church. We're not a gay church. We're not a straight church. We're not a Hispanic church. We create a spiritual home for all people. That's what we're here to do. And in this time of great division in our culture, I believe this is the key to healing it. And we do it right here by loving and embracing each other, extending the hand of God's grace to everyone. There's a poem. I don't think we're going to do the prayer, but we'll let this be our prayer today. This comes from the Persian Sufi tradition, translated by Daniel Ladinsky, but it says this: every child has known God, not the God of names and not the God of don't, and not the God who has ever done anything weird, but the God who only knows 4 words and keeps repeating them, saying, come dance with me, come dance. That's what we're creating in this space together, and come dance with us at the party. It's going to be great. We get to demonstrate the love of God by shaking our groove thing on our dance floor. I don't know where you are in your spiritual journey. I don't know how any of this is landing for you. I know that all of us are in this process of growth and healing. But when we say that no matter where you are in your spiritual path, you are welcome at Unity, we mean it. Truly, we mean it. If no one has told you today that they love you, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.